Hello and welcome to this very special Google Plus Hangout. It's very special because we're going inside Syria, live inside Syria. In Syria, we're feeding some 1.5 million people under very tough conditions. The needs there are tremendous. People are suffering through a cold winter. Some 2 million people have been displaced within the country. Some 4 million people really need outside help. It's a huge task that we have undertaken together with all of our partners at the United Nations and with our partners on the ground. And today in this Google Hangout, we want to give you a real sense of what it is to do a humanitarian aid operation on the ground and give you a first-hand sense.
How easy is it to move from the government-controlled areas to the rebel areas, and how often have you been able to do it? I just saw a figure that the UN put out that WFP has only got about 11% of food aid going into Idlib.
For us, some areas under the control of the opposition are definitely easier than other areas. Some of the areas are in the front line on the conflict zone, so it might not always be extremely easy for us to access these areas. But still, we do manage. As soon as there is lull in fighting or some ceasefire, even for a few hours, we're able to send food to these areas. As far as the reaching food assistance in opposition areas, I think it's safe to say that at one point, the nature of control in this country changes. So one day, the area, for example, that I visited under the control of the Free Syrian Army, the residents told me that this area has exchanged hands at least 6 or 7 times. But for the time being, it's under the control of the opposition. So it is safe to say that at one point, or our distribution reaches at least 40% of the population in the opposition at a given time. But also keep in mind one thing, that 85% of the people that receive food assistance in Syria out of the 1.5 million are displaced people. So these are people that have left these hotspot areas and have decided to move to a safer area, be it in the government controlled or even in some of these areas that are contested. Contested meaning it has been left. It's neither opposition, neither government. So I would say that it's not that low. It's not 11%. It's much more than that. It's probably ranges in the range of between 35 to 40% of the time we reach these opposition areas. WFP Food has reached areas in Rastan, in Tal Al-Ain, in Ras Al-Ain and Tal Abyad. So these are very heavily areas that has been affected by the conflict. And we've reached at one point of time, maybe not every month, but there's consistently food that is going to these areas.
Hi, it's great to be here today with you. I've got a question. In the areas that I've been in border areas of Syria and certainly some of the refugee camps right inside the Syrian border, frankly, food was in very short supply. It was indeed in Aleppo and Idlib province, which Deborah was talking about, where reaching those areas is difficult. If I understand you so far, you've said that it's difficult reaching those areas because of the fighting, but there's a real concern that a regime which uses all of its instruments against the opposition, whether it's Scud missiles or airstrikes or artillery shells, that there's a real concern over the instrumentalization of aid, of politicization of aid. So I was wondering, what is the protocol that governs your activities with the Syrian regime? And second, how would you characterize the regime's degree of compliance with that protocol?
In terms of the relationship between WFP and the Syrian government, it's we do coordinate sometimes on our movements to ensure and the security of the food trucks. We, as much as possible, try to keep a cordial and coordinating relation with all parties on the ground, be it the government, be it the opposition. That is our mandate. I mean, we are a humanitarian agency, and food needs to get to these people. Very difficult. I think each area also has a different dynamic, so it might not always be easy to generalize one particular experience to the rest of the country. But we're operating. Our staff, we have staff on the ground. We're allowed, I mean, we're given visas for our staff to enter the country. We are able to, I mean, we have been able today to move from today we moved over the last few days to different parts in the country without being stopped. We passed through many checkpoints by both groups, and I think there is general respect for the fact that we have a humanitarian mandate.
Yeah, this question comes after I was in Latakia watching opposition fighters desperate for meat going out and getting a huge plate of birds and literally ripping the feathers off the birds and eating them. Latakia is generally thought of as being relatively stable now, especially in the cities. But are you concerned at the World Food Program about potential catastrophe in the next few months once, you know, should he fall, should fighting there really, really kick off?
I think in general, we assist 1.5 million people. The Syrian population is more than 25 million people. So, I mean, we are prioritizing really the most vulnerable people, and they are mainly displaced people. In terms of, we're upscaling and looking now forward to push our assistance to another million people. So pushing the bar to reach 2.5 million people. We do have definitely a lot of concerns. The fact that many of these communities have no access to, especially in the areas not under the control of the government. They don't have government services, shortages of fuel, of bread, of wheat flour is certainly something that's very worrisome. But a complete assessment of what is the situation like in the food security situation like in Syria is not possible at this point, because we cannot, it's a comprehensive project that needs, a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of reaching all areas on the ground, which is not possible. So I think that what we can do right now is to reach these people who need the assistance at the very urgently. Displaced families, I think people in shelters, people in living with host families, many public shelters around the country where people basically have no access to food, loss of economic activity. You also, one thing that you have to keep in mind is the nature of that we only provide food assistance to civilians. So basically the communities, vulnerable communities that are living in, whether it is opposition or government controlled areas, or even the contested areas that I mentioned. But certainly there are huge concerns that this country is going to face a food crisis if the conflict continues on further and further. There is agricultural production. We saw some of these farms flying today over Latakia. You see a lot of green areas, but how is the food moving around, and is it reaching all areas? If we're having a hard time pushing our food convoys to every part of the country, let alone about marketing all these food and agricultural commodities.
If I could chime in for 1 second, Abeer, give us a sense of how the children are coping with this. There's a war, there's shelling, the kids had to flee, they don't sleep in their beds anymore, many of them are going hungry. Give me a sense of what you saw inside Syria or in the refugee camps you visited, how the children were coping, some anecdotes.
Well, many of the children that we saw, whether it is in the refugee camps or even here displaced inside Syria, have have a very difficult time coping with this crisis. First of all, being away from home, and in addition, also, I think many of them recount lots of difficult moments, and they, you know, every time a child is asked to draw, he will draw the home that he's missing, or maybe, you know, planes, or, you know, tanks, and you will always ask them, what are you drawing? He said, that's the tank that was near my home, or that's you know, very emotional moments for these children. And I think that the fact that many of these children are not in school, so they are longing for these moments when they go to school. In particular, I think that whether it is displacement or being in a refugee situation outside the country, it's really having a hard impact on these children. Losing education years, losing years of their childhood is certainly something that you can feel in every conversation. And with every child that you talk to and you ask him, what do you want? Or you ask her, what do you want? They say, I want to go home.
Would like to open the floor up now to some of the questions, the many questions we've received on Google Plus from all the folks who are following this program. One is from Agre Inter-Kimanye on Google Plus. What special humanitarian assistance do you give to pregnant mothers and nursing mothers?
At the moment, what we are providing is the food package, the food parcel that is given to every family on a monthly basis. There is not, up till now, no special, you know, assistance for pregnant or lactating mothers or nursing mothers. But very soon we will be providing, you know, a special nutrition treatment for some of the malnourished kids in some of the areas that we know are particularly has high malnutrition rates, even from prior to the conflict. So we anticipate now that the situation must have gotten worse, especially in these areas where they faced a lot of droughts.
Ronnie on Twitter, what are you doing for refugees outside Syria? Abeer has been traveling to the camps. Tell us, Abeer, what we're doing outside of Syria, which is extensive.
Well, WFP has launched an emergency operation to provide food assistance to refugees that have fled to neighboring countries, and that includes Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Turkey. And now we are very soon going to launch a food voucher project for Syrians who are in Egypt. Very vulnerable situation. Overall, there are around 700,000 people that have registered with or are awaiting registration with UNHCR. We're targeting 250,000 people in the neighboring countries at this moment, with a plan to continue rapidly upscale to reach 750,000 people by June of this year. We assist people through a number of ways. In some situation, when the market would allow, we will provide these people with food vouchers. And in other cases, like in some of these refugee camps, like for example in Jordan, we give people food rations, and UNHCR has installed these community kitchens so these people can cook and prepare their own food according to their own local taste. And in other cases, it's just the provision of these vouchers. In all of refugees living with host communities, they will get the food vouchers. And in the refugee camps in Turkey, they are getting the food vouchers. In some specific cases, like in the camp in Jordan or the new arrivals in Jordan, they will get the food parcels with dry food rations.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that's one of the new revolutionary things that that WFP is moving in, that we are hoping to use vouchers and electronic cards instead of handing out food wherever that is possible. So you basically see refugees or IDPs, if there are stores in the area, that they can get a card like this, and then they go to the local stores and get food up to a certain amount, and that makes it very practical. It's one of the new tools that WFP is using to help this up, to help people in need. I think this has been a really interesting session. I hope you learned a lot, and it was inspiring to you to help the people of Syria and to help the people who have fled to the regions outside of the country. If you want to do something, you can support our operations in Syria by making a donation at links which are posted now on Google Plus and on Twitter. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can make a donation from the box on the right side of the screen. And just to give you a sense for that, for $72, that's, you know, dinner for two if you get lucky here in New York City. For $72, you can feed a family in Syria for a month. Thank you. Be safe. Take care and join us again next time. I'm Bettina Lüscher here from the World Food Programme in New York.